everybody, it's Rebecca Virginia, and today we're going to be doing some budget-friendly DIYs that look high-end. Our first DIY in today's video is a faux leather-handled glass trinket tray. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to make this. To begin this DIY, I flipped the oven cover upside down so that the 4 little stopper grips on the bottom are facing up towards me, and I just covered the entire thing with Mod Podge because we're going to be placing down some tissue paper in just a moment. I loved the really bright, colorful floral tissue paper that I showed in the supply section, but I ultimately ended up going with this more greenery one that had a lot of plants, and I just laid it on top of the Mod Podge, and then around those little gripper feet areas, I just pushed down to make sure that the tissue paper was going around that little area and not just laying on top of it. And make sure that you place your tissue paper right side down because when we flip over the oven cover, you want that side to be showing through. Then with all of the excess, I just trimmed it off with a pair of scissors. Once I liked how my tissue paper was laid down, I flipped the oven cover back over, and on top of the tissue paper, I just put down one more layer of Mod Podge to just seal everything into place. Now I am using some rope all the way around my oven cover. I found this in the Crafter's Square section, and it is called the Nautical Jute Rope. And what I'm doing with this is actually placing it on the outer edges of our oven cover, so I'm not placing it on top of the oven cover, but along the edges and then just pressing down. I just used hot glue to get this to adhere. And once I had made it all the way around once, I just cut off the rope and hot glued it down to finish off our first layer. Then I used the nautical rope again and hot glued it directly on top of the previous rope we just put down. So we're not putting this on the inside or outside of the rope, but actually directly on top. This way it creates a more dimensional decor piece. And this rope is a little different from the mesh tube I showed you in the supplies video, so that's just me showing you the label of what it looks like when you're searching in the Dollar Tree. And once we finished with the nautical rope on our tray, it was time to move on to the handles. And to create the handles, I am using some of this faux leather ribbon found at the Dollar Tree. And I just guesstimated the lengths. I didn't measure anything, and I kind of just stuck the ribbon underneath of our soon-to-be tray to kind of see what position I liked. I tried some longer handles, some shorter handles, and this is just what I ended up liking. So once I found that length that seemed perfect to me, I went ahead and hot glued it down and then cut off any of the excess. Then moving on to our second handle, you can see again that I'm just positioning the ribbon at different lengths to see how it matches up best. I would recommend cutting 2 exact pieces before you decide to hot glue it down because again, I was just guesstimating, so I was trying to figure out if these actually matched. But once I thought that I had the lengths even, I went ahead and hot glued the ribbon down and then cut off any of the excess. And then these gold thumbtacks are an optional addition. You can leave the tray as is, but to make it look even more high-end, I wanted it to look like these thumbtacks were actually holding up the ribbon instead of the hot glue. So I went ahead and just took 2 per side and pushed them in through the nautical rope. And the great thing is that the nautical rope was thick enough so the little pokey part of the thumbtack actually didn't come through. But if yours are a little bit longer, what you can do is just put a dot of hot glue on the end of that pointy thumbtack, and then you don't have to worry about it accidentally poking you. I love how this tray came out. I think adding in those gold thumbtacks just gave it another high-end touch. The next DIY in today's video is a hanging planter. Here's everything that you need to make your own. The first step in this DIY is going to be taking a bunch of tumbling tower blocks. I believe I have 12 there, or eventually I'll have 12, and I am just staining them with a brown stain. And I was actually out of my Waverly stain, so I just made my own by taking some dark brown paint and mixing it with water to create my own stain. And I'm also going to be using some wood beads in this DIY, so to make it a little bit easier to paint them, I put all of them on a kebab stick that way they were just all in a line and a little bit easier to paint. And then I just did the exact same thing using my homemade brown stain. I covered all of our wood beads. And once all of this was dry, it was time to start assembling. And this was really fun. It just reminded me of playing Legos when I was a kid. And I actually was using 3, but I decided that that was a little bit too large for at least what I had in mind. So later on in the video, I pick this apart and I turn it from 3 tumbling tower blocks to 2. So if you want to create the one that you saw at the beginning of this video, then you don't have to make the same mistake that I did, and you can just go ahead and start with 2. But what I'm doing is placing down the 3 in this video and then the 2 beads, and then adding another layer, and I did 3 tall, so each side would have 9 of these tumbling tower blocks. And in this clip, you can see that I went from 3 tumbling tower blocks long to only 2, so I'm just fixing this and changing the beads from being on the 3rd tumbling tower block to the 2nd. And once I was done changing the 3 tumbling tower blocks in length to only 2 and adding in those round wood beads, it was time to actually start putting together my plant hanger. So I took some more tumbling tower blocks, and I believe I used 4 in total on the ends, and then I hot glued both of our front and back of the plant hanger together. So now we were starting to have a little box form so that our plants could go inside. Then I placed 3 more tumbling tower blocks across the bottom to act as a floor for our hanger. To create the actual hanger for our planter, I just took a long string of some jute cord and I placed it behind that round bead and pulled it through 3 times on each side to create a little bit of texture and design with the jute. And then after I had placed it 3 times around each side, I just tied it at the front of the round bead, and the smaller piece I cut off, and then the longer piece is going to help us act as our hanger. I tied all 4 strings in a knot at the top and then added on a ring. Then you could put a clay pot from the Dollar Tree down inside the planter and put in a plant or some flowers if you wanted it to be a hanging floral arrangement. But I really liked the look of just taking one of the Dollar Tree succulents and placing it down directly into the planter. The last DIY in today's video is a faux ceramic floral vase. Here's what you need to recreate it. I'm starting off by taking some painter's tape and wrapping it all the way around this vase. I got this vase with some flowers and I really liked all the different shapes, kind of the geometric shapes to it, so I wanted to keep it for a DIY and I decided today was the day. To give my paint a ceramic look, I am using baking powder. Now I did use baking soda at first and it completely did not work out. I know I've seen quite a few YouTube videos where people say you can use baking soda, so maybe give it a try because it is cheaper than baking powder, but it just did not work at all for me. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the paint I was using, but the baking powder ended up working perfectly, so I just sprinkled it in. I didn't measure it or anything. It's probably like a tablespoon or 2, but you basically want it to get the consistency. I thought it looked like a Wendy's vanilla frosty, if that makes sense. So it's definitely going to be thick, kind of like a milkshake. And another tip. So you can see that I'm painting this on vertically. Don't do that, and when I go in with the second coat, I am going to change it up to painting in horizontal stripes, not doing this vertical technique. And that is because I was watching a video of a YouTuber and she does pottery. And she was doing this technique as well. I'll link her video down below because she has some really great tips on why you should use baking powder instead of baking soda when you're trying to get that ceramic faux pottery effect. And she said that potters, when they actually make their clay creations, the lines are moving horizontally, not vertically. So a dead giveaway, she said, is if you're trying to create your own faux ceramics, is by going vertically because you do see the brush strokes. And you want to make sure that those brush strokes are going horizontally, not vertically. So here is actually a much better video of what the consistency should look like. It almost looks like spackling to me, and I'm curious if you could actually use spackling or what that effect would look like. but this is the effect that the baking powder gives. And I found that the baking soda looked more like chalk paint, not like that thick ceramic that I wanted. But again, leave a comment down below if you've created the faux ceramic look with baking soda. I definitely could have maybe just not been using enough or using too much. But again, you can see that I'm moving horizontally and you can see those brush strokes. Once all the paint had dried, I took off the painter's tape and was left with a nice clean edge. And then instead of just doing a green at the top, I wanted to outline these really cool triangles that are in this vase. So I taped them out and I'm going to be going in with a brown paint using the exact same technique, sprinkling in some baking powder, mixing it up, and then applying that down. And I ended up using 2 coats of this brown paint mixture, and then after that had fully dried, I removed all of the blue tape, and then I taped back over it because now we are going to add in some color to our vase. So I taped over where the brown triangles were so that that wouldn't get ruined, and then I just went in with a green paint all over and did about 2 coats. I'm not adding any baking soda to this section, I just wanted that on the lower parts, and this is just going to be plain green paint. And after all of our green paint had dried, I began to remove our blue painter's tape. But because the brown was a little bit raised, there were some areas where the green bled through. So all that I did was take a paintbrush and just kind of touch up those areas, and there were 1 or 2 triangles that I thought were pretty bad looking, so I went ahead and put down some more painter's tape and just redid the brown triangles, but I only had to do that on I think 1 because for the most part the painter's tape did keep out any of the green. And after doing a few little touch-ups, our vase is complete. We have the ceramic bottom and the painted top. And that completes all of the projects in today's video. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.